Martin, how are the two conflicts related? Are they related? This Yemen, well, they call it a civil war. Of course, it's not. It's an enormous intervention. It's an intervention from outside, yeah. And the Israel, because what seems to be happening with Israel is they've slowly but surely got to the point where they now feel they can bomb most of their surrounding countries, certainly Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, with impunity now.
Well, that's right. I mean, all of these conflicts are interrelated, and the danger is that all these individual forest fires just get, you start to get a firestorm, like when the British bombed Dresden, and so the wind starts to bring all these small fires into one great big huge fire. And of course, this is the sort of thing that we really ought to be discussing, rather than gazing at our own navels here in the United Kingdom. But of course, we're involved. We supply most of the weaponry the Saudis are using, and our military personnel are actually on the ground helping the Saudis kill people. Now, somebody in Yemen might decide that they're going to come back here and spoil our fun. And who could argue that they would be morally wrong to do so?
What I'm trying to get to is, to what extent is this what the Saudis are up to coordinated with Israel?
Very, very much so.
Because that we're looking at a Jewish state and an Arab state, completely different. Actually,
the only democracy in the Middle East and the worst autocracy on earth are on the same side about most things. The person who went to talk to the YPG about whether the Israelis could use their territory to carry out an attack on Iraq was a Saudi prince. And he was talking on behalf of the Israelis. He persuaded the YPG to allow the Israelis to come into their area so that they could use their drones to attack people in Iraq, because they couldn't get to them from Israel. It's too far away. And the Iraqis have immediately picked up on that and grounded all US Air Force, helicopters, everything inside Iraq. And of course, they're moving forward in Parliament in Iraq now to say we want all US forces out of our country because you're in line with the Israelis and we're just about to go to war with Israel and Iran's about to go to war with you and we're on Iran's side, I'm afraid, because we're Shia Muslims. That's the majority here.
So where's this going to end? I mean, we've been talking about this for years, but it does seem as if, certainly that last weekend with the Israelis bombing these three countries, they've almost taken over. Trump has said, we're actually removing our military from most of the engagements in the Middle East, even though, of course, there's quite a lot still there, particularly special forces. But the Israelis are now, it seems, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems the Israelis are taking over where the US has left off.
Well, I know that the Lebanese are preparing for an Israeli invasion. They're expecting it. And they're going to strike back. They're much better prepared. They beat the Israelis in 2006. They're better prepared now. Hezbollah's taken loads and loads and loads of casualties in Syria, tens of thousands of people, but they've become incredibly battle-hardened. They're probably one of the best outfits on the planet. And I'm afraid the conscript soldiers of Israel are going to pay a price.
When it comes to Israel, we don't hear very much on the domestic BBC or any of our programmes, actually, about the way they treat child Palestinian prisoners. But Megan Owen on the BBC World Service did what I thought was an excellent and fascinating report into Palestinian child prisoners this week.
Now, we're going to talk about events in Israel, and a couple of months ago, the Supreme Court in the country turned down a petition to allow detained Palestinian children in Israeli prisons the right to call their parents. Once again, put a spotlight on the juvenile military court system in Israel, the only one of its kind in the world. Now, critics say it breaches several international human rights laws. How does it work? Megan Moen reports from the West Bank.
The journey to the jail begins at 5:45 a.m. for Nabil. His 16-year-old son Mahmoud has been detained for stone throwing. The family get to visit Mahmoud once a month. The jail is less than an hour away, but due to Israeli checkpoints, the journey can take up to 6 hours.
You're going to see the trouble we go through.
The checkpoint. Issues with the checkpoint. Searching. Come forward. Go backward. Go there. And the machine beeps. It's a mess. It's exhausting. It's torture. As if we're also detained.
Every year, more than 500 Palestinian children, some as young as 12, are arrested by Israeli forces in communities in the West Bank. The most common charge is stone throwing. Israel is the only country in the world where children are prosecuted through a dedicated juvenile military court system. Sahar Francis, a lawyer for Adamir, an organisation that advocates for Palestinian prisoners in the West Bank, says the issue is both moral and legal.
You raid a house after midnight in order to arrest a 14-year-old boy. It's not just against the boy himself. It's against the whole family. Imagine the father and the mother that they cannot protect their son. I wouldn't believe it's about security. It's about control. It's about control and maintaining the oppression against the whole society, especially children.
Israel says the charges can be more serious than stone throwing. Malak Al-Galbraith was arrested at a checkpoint at the age of 14 for an alleged knife attack on Israeli soldiers. She says she was made to sign a confession in Hebrew, a language she doesn't understand.
Then they took me to a military camp in Jerusalem. There they interrogated me. She was yelling at me. She wanted me to sign a paper in Hebrew. She was asking me very strange questions, and I said, no, I haven't done anything. She forced me to sign the paper.
As the Israeli military's chief prosecutor, Morris Hirsch prepared indictments against thousands of Palestinians, including hundreds of children.
I often hear the claim that Palestinian minors are interrogated and forced to sign a confession in Hebrew. Great claim. Great claim. But it's simply not true. And I saw the evidence.
If that's never happened.
I came into the prosecution probably in 2003. Most of the statements of the Palestinian minors are written in Arabic.
Most of it, but they said up to...
One second. Those that are written in Hebrew, no child was prosecuted based on a statement written in Hebrew.
At a checkpoint that Nabil has to cross to see his son Mahmoud in prison, we're stopped for an hour and a half while soldiers question us as to why we're travelling with Palestinian families to a jail without prior notification. Worried that press may attract undue attention, we leave Nabil to continue his journey to see his son for the 45 minutes they have together this month.
Mega Moen reporting from the West Bank.
Well, I mean, that's just one aspect of the oppression of the Palestinian people. There's thousands of political prisoners who haven't been charged with anything. They just, the Israeli state just it's got the right to imprison anybody they want.
Well, they're terrorists, though.
Well, that's it, according to the Israelis, all Palestinians are terrorists, but that's not true. And in any case, the Israeli state was created by terrorists, so they should those who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, eh?
But Martin, I mean, let's try and take this to a little bit more of a serious level. Even children can be terrorists, can't they?
Yes, but of course, in actual fact, as one of the mothers said, it's not really a security issue. If somebody throws stones at you, if they've stopped throwing stones at you, they're no longer a threat. You don't put them in prison indefinitely, especially if they're under the age of 16. But, of course, what they're doing is they're harassing the Palestinians. And ultimately, of course, if there's a major war, they're going to try and ethnically cleanse them out of the West Bank. And they're going to try and... they're actually talking in the election campaign now of annexing the whole of the West Bank.
This is not a sort of juvenile court. This is a military tribunal for children. Palestinian children as young as 12, according to the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, are taken from their homes at gunpoint at nighttime raids by soldiers, blindfolded, bound and shackled, interrogated without a lawyer or relative present and with no audio-visual recording, put into solitary confinement and forced to sign confessions, often in Hebrew.
Well,
a language which they don't speak.
That's right, and some of them are just shot dead out of hand. And what's going on in Gaza, they've got snipers shooting people dead, just for nothing. And there's no this basically is a pretense at legality. It's basically warfare. And ultimately, of course, in warfare, force decides.
OK, so let's move on to have a look at Hong Kong now, because